Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines, coming to you from the West Coast. Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are looking at player props for Game 3 back in Boston here, Nate. We do have a game video up as well, so I want you to make sure you're liked and subscribed to that page. Continue to follow along with us. We are bringing you each and every finals game, as well as these player props we have for you today. Also want you to head to thelines.com. Make sure you are checking out all the great content Nate and company have up there. Best bets, player props, all the sports as well on thelines.com. So head over there. And as always, if you do still need a FanDuel or a DraftKings account, head to fdpicks.com or dkpicks.com. Find those listings in your area, such as what we've got for Game 3 player props. Nate, let's get into it.
Yeah, well, as most people know right now, the Celtics are 6-0 after a loss in these playoffs, and that's usually because they lost because Jason Tatum had a bad game, and then they win because Jason Tatum has a great game. He's averaging 32.2 points per game after those losses, hitting at least 27 points in each of those games, including in the last two home games of that Miami series, he averaged 30.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and shot 22 for 24 at the free throw line. I think that's going to be a key here. He had 15 free throw attempts in those two games at Golden State. Definitely tends to average a few more at home in these playoffs, 8.3 per game. As we know, the calls go a little bit more towards the home team, and Tatum going to continue to be aggressive with the Warriors, the way they're guarding him, kind of forcing him to go into the lane and play in traffic, which is probably the right move rather than letting him, just free fire those step back threes. But I think he'll do a lot of things for the Celtics, not just score, but 27.5 points seems kind of low to me. I wouldn't mind just combining that with the PRA at 40, which is a slightly better odds, minus 106, because I think, he's around 6 rebounds or 7 rebounds, 6.3 assists at home in these playoffs. So 13 on top of the 27 points you project him for, right on his averages there. I think he elevates his game a little bit here because the Celtics need this one so much and because of how he's responded after the losses.
Yeah, that's fair. And I was getting ahead of that as well in Game 2. I mean, if Jason Tatum played poorly last game or they lost last game, he's probably going to play good this game. That's just been how it is in these playoffs because, he did play. I don't want to say he played poorly. He shot poorly in Game 1, but he ended up with those 13 assists as we saw. So he's going to be impacting this game, and it's really pretty clear it's between he and Steph at this point for who's going to be the MVP as long as they play even close to as they've been, which we expect them both to do. I like the PRA as well. I'm not scared of the points. I think he does get the 28, but I do like adding the rebounds and assists because I've been liking those stats for him for a while now as he's sort of picked up his game, and there's a direct correlation between his assists going up a bit in the middle of this season and how well they've been playing on offense as well. So speaking of Steph, like I said, it's between these two at this point, in my opinion, even if one of them is not necessarily impacting the game the same way we think. Like Steph, last game, 5 threes, got the points, got the rebounds. This one, we get a point here on his props. His points prop are 28.5. This game, it was 29.5 at home. He does average a few more points at home in these playoffs, but it's like the difference of 31 versus 29 points. So I'm not too worried about it at 28.5 on the road. Interesting that you found on FanDuel as well, Nate. I'll give you the props there. Most 3-pointers in the game, Steph Curry is plus 140 on FanDuel. Very confused about that. Just as confused as we were that he was going to lead the series in threes from the jump when the series started, and you took that bet at plus money. So still a little bit seemingly disrespect for Steph, or maybe there's people are afraid of the Boston defense. But his last 9 finals games, just starting there, 31.5 points a game, 5 boards, 6 assists. For almost basically 5 threes on 39%. In these finals, even better, we're talking 31.5 points a game and 6 for 13 from 3. So even a few more threes made there as he hit 7 and 5 threes. And he loves playing against Boston. And we've been saying that since the series started as well. 30 in the last 6 games versus Boston, the last couple seasons, 30 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, 48 and 47 split. So 48% from the field, 47% from 3, 6 for basically 13 from 3-point. And that includes a game in there. He's averaging 30 plus, and that includes a game where he played 14 minutes and scored 3 points because he got hurt earlier in the season against the Celtics. So those numbers are absolutely bonkers. He's only scored less than 31 time other than that injury game against them. So there's no reason to think it's going to stop right now.
Yeah, Steph's just killing the Celtics anytime they go to pick and roll up high. The bigs, when he's really got it cooking when he gets a big on him and he just creates space out of nothing and drains. And that's what was happening in that third quarter. The Warriors, it just sparked their confidence so much. I think it's going to be the one thing they can depend on as the series transitions to Boston is Steph creating his own shot, whether it is off, on those step backs or whether it's beating the overplay and getting to the rim. I just think it's great value to get that 3-point bet because, he averages nearly 5 threes per game in the finals. Nobody else is going to average anywhere near that. I mean, sure, you could get a spike game from Tatum, like in game 2, he hit one more than Steph. Or you could get a spike game from Clay on his own team. And I'm guessing that's why the odds are where they're at. But that brings me to my second prop here, which is Clay going under 18.5 points. I know at some point, he should show out and break out of this shooting slump, but I just don't think he's been very much of a positive for the Warriors on either end in this particular series. The Celtics are a tough matchup for him because of their size and because of their quickness when they're going to go to that 2-guard lineup with Smart and White. I don't know if Clay is a great defender for either of them. Warriors have so many options to go with here. I don't think Steve Kerr is the kind of guy to just turn his back on one of the legends on his team, but he could go Gary Payton. If Iggy's healthy, he can throw him in there. Jordan Poole started to get it cooking a little bit, gave them more creation on offense than Clay has. And he's just been, like I said, struggling. He shot 4 for 19 in game 2, somehow a net 0 in a game that the Warriors won by 20. In game 1, it took him 14 shots to get his 15 points. And you look at even the regular season against Boston, like I'm saying, it's a struggle. Averages under 15 a game, 4 rebounds, shooting 34% from the field, 20% from 3. He needed 24 shots to get 18 points the last time they faced them in March. And bad home road splits, along with most of the Warriors' offense, takes a big dip. In these playoffs, he's averaging under 3 rebounds per game on the road. He's a minus 52 versus plus 77 at home. So I think 18.5 points or under the 22.5 points rebounds maybe gives you a little more leeway since he's probably looking at 3 boards or fewer in this game.
Yeah. The conversation in the Bay from fans, especially because Clay is so beloved, is do we keep playing Clay? And that's what Steve Kerr has to go through is do I remain somewhat loyal to this guy? Do I think that he can pull out of this or does Steve Kerr agree with the Coast to Coast pod that we don't necessarily think Clay's a good matchup for this team? And he never has been as good against taller defenders. Part of his entire game is that he is 6'7" with long arms, shooting threes over everybody. He's taller than every 2-guard that guards him. He's the size of every small forward that tries to guard him, and he can shoot over anybody with a hand in his face. It's just not the case right now. His defense was better in game 2, but yeah, when you have basically a 0 net rating in a game where your team wins by more than 20-25 points, and you're a starter, what's going on there, and so he hasn't been able to get the minutes. I would take the under, banking on the fact that he's going to continue to not play well or shoot well, but he also might not get as many minutes. If Jordan Poole is going to play as well as he did on offense, then his liability that he creates on defense is not going to be as big of a problem. And Kirk can play a bit more Poole. One thing he definitely is not going to do is play the 3 of them together in terms of Poole, Clay, and Steph at this point. So we can bank on that for sure in terms of a few of those guys getting an under, not Steph at that point. So we're saying Clay and Poole because those guys got 0 minutes together in the last game. So I'm going to finish things off here with the guy who I think is going to continue to guard Steph in Derek White and continue to get 30 plus minutes a game, especially if Marcus Smart's not guarding Steph nearly as well as he was. Derek White, 14.5 points and assists combined. You could also do 14.5 points and rebounds combined. It's the same prop there, or just 11.5 points is even money on FanDuel. He's been getting more than 12. He had 21 in the first, 12 in the second there. And even with that regression, he still was a decent part of the offense. 12 points, 4 boards, and 2 assists, 2 for 4 from deep as he continues to make shots. I mean, he's open in a lot of them, but he's just making really good shots right now. And so I think that keeps him on the floor. And it's a game where, we were talking about maybe Marcus Smart, maybe Derek White's props, but we definitely can't take both, in my opinion. And you got to choose one. And I do think Derek White, and the way that he's been playing defense on Steph, will continue to to really validate the minutes that I think Udoka needs to give him, which is, like I said, better than 31 in his last 6 playoff games alone, where he's also averaging 15 points a game and 3.5 boards or so with 4 assists in there. I think either one of those ancillary stats combined with the points, if you like, or just the points for that even money, feel good for Derek White right now.
Yeah, and you said he's averaging 15 this stretch. For him to score 15 is plus 240 at FanDuel. Another gift. If you have a FanDuel account, this episode is for you. Those 2 bets between him scoring 15 and Curry getting the most threes in the game. You could look at alternate lines on different books here. I think White's prop should definitely be more like 14.5 points straight up. So that's why it's fine to combine them with the assists or rebounds. Rob Williams not being healthy, that is a key note here because he's going to kind of be a token starter. And then the rest of the game might be Derek White's, along with Grant Williams mixing in there a little bit. But I expect a very short rotation from Boston, good minutes for White. And he's just been relentlessly aggressive since the birth of his son. Saw that with Fred VanVleet a couple years ago. Papa coming out to earn that paycheck, motivated, and he's hitting his shots because of that.
I love it, man. Yeah, that's the play. Just have a kid before the postseason starts. You'll be great, good to go, get a big contract like Mr. VanVleet. So also want you to head to thelines.com. Nate and company have some great stuff on there for you each and every day related to these NBA finals, as well as plenty of the other sports, especially baseball that we have going on right now. So make sure you do check all that out. And as always, if you do still need a FanDuel or DraftKings account, head to ftpicks.com or dkpicks.com. Find those listings in your area, such as what we've got for Game 3. Nate, let's get into it.
Yeah, the series odds are dead even now, pretty much. Golden State a little bit shorter at minus 115. Curry, interesting. Finals MVP odds is even money at DK. Tatum getting much better odds at FanDuel to be that MVP. If you're going to bet the Celtics, he's almost certainly going to be it. But yes, we're talking Game 3 Wednesday night with it 1-1. Hinges on that, and the Celtics are 3.5 point favorites. We got a total of 212.5. Down about 4 from that last game, which did indeed go under by a hell of a lot, as we kind of estimated. Also talked a little bit about the officiating and the expectation that the Warriors would get a few calls in order to keep this series from being a runaway. It was pretty subtle, I think. I'm not insinuating in any way that the NBA has some sort of agenda or there's a point of emphasis for the refs to make sure series are extended. But I think it's human nature. I mean, I think it's the respect for the Warriors being in that building when it's so loud. There were several non-calls that kind of started a snowballing effect where we, of course, I'm sure you guys have seen the numbers of about what happened in the third quarter, 35-14, just another Warriors beatdown. I mean, they did the same thing in Game 3, to be fair, and there was no fishy officiating. But that's where we are at this point, and it's just worth noting because now we're going back to Boston, and the free throw attempts, particularly for Jason Tatum, are notable when they're back home in Boston. Of course, the Celtics haven't lost in the postseason yet, 6-0. Their defensive rating 6 points better at home. They're scoring 6 more points per game. Offensive rating 5 points better. They were pretty steady both places throughout the year, so I'm kind of actually surprised to see that they've been better at home in this postseason. Mm-hmm. But that is the case, and they've answered the call every time there's been a gut check here, as the Warriors just did. If the interesting thing with Gary Payton back, Iggy out, is the Warriors' ability to go smaller and quicker, and that got Jordan Poole going. I'm also seeing people saying that Bjelica was a good chess piece to play there. I don't think that's going to last. I think Steve Kerr still has a lot of buttons to push here in order to be able to take control of the series. He's got a ton of options. I mean, Warriors are much, much deeper, but I think the biggest storyline is he going to have the savvy to pull Clay when it's not working? Because Clay is not thriving in this matchup at all. I mean, he did light up Dallas and Memphis, but I would be very concerned about, if you're the Warriors, about how he's performing against the Celtics team that he did not do well against in the regular season. And it's just not a good matchup for him. I think the Celtics, they're gonna shorten their rotation on the other side of that, kind of leading into their lack of depth with Rob Williams injured, cannot play Daniel Tice. I think it will really be like what we call like the 6.5 man rotation, where Rob maybe starts and plays like 12 minutes is all he can give them right now, and then it's just Derek White, Grant Williams. So that's 7.5. But
real quick, Derek White, yes. Grant Williams has been about as bad as Daniel Tice in this series so far. And honestly, like I already was thinking that before it really even looking up if that was validated by my eyes. And the stats back up what I was seeing, which is Grant Williams is borderline unplayable. In game one where they won, and for the most part, everybody had a positive and really nice net rating, including Derek White's plus 44. Grant Williams and Daniel Tice were the only two, players that actually got into that rotation playing enough minutes to warrant that, stats and minus 18, minus 27. So I think that is a bit of a something to look at here, right? Rob Will, do we know what his status is right now? Is he actually out, or is he just not likely to play very much in that game?
He's just limping through the series. It's just, you never know. Yeah, he's going to try to play every night, but he didn't have much to give them.
And to that point, like that's why I think like he's the stats about when he's in, when he's not in, what they look like when there's no one protecting the rim to his with his skill set, that those are valid, because even if he is playing at this point, he's not much of a factor in that tumble he took when Marcus Smart fell into his leg, obviously accidentally. That was nasty, and that definitely turned his leg the wrong way, the bad one, et cetera. So I think that there is something to consider there. That being said, as well, the small ball lineup for Boston. That's why I bring up, that Grant Williams hasn't looked as good. But look, you can get away with Derek White against this Warriors team. If they want to try to counter with a guy like Bielitsa, he had some good minutes, but he wasn't really playing alongside many of the starters. He really was just playing in that Looney role, and he didn't even shoot a 3-pointer to really warrant his sort of, to really warrant his duality there on offense, right? What he can bring to the court. He didn't really exhibit it, and I think that's really because that was the point of why he was in there, was not to be that. He was that sort of dunker spot role and offensive rebound crasher for the Dubs, which he did really well. So what I'm looking at in this game, man, and starting with just the under is that it's a lot more of that. I do think that this is a game that Boston should win. I think I was telling you this earlier. If you are leaving the first two games of this series and coming back to Boston as an observer thinking that the Warriors are a better team, then I think you're crazy. I think you're right that they're deeper. They have more guys they can play in an NBA Finals game for sure. Even their rooks, in terms of Moody and Kuminga, it could potentially give them some good minutes and are skilled enough to be here. Don't get flustered enough to be here as they've shown in the playoffs so far. But as far as like you said, the top 6.5, even they need more from Grant Williams. I think he's obviously capable of a lot better than he's shown, especially on the defensive end, where it's been tough for him, and he's almost been hunted in a way. Between those, one over two of those three guards that are playing handoff at the top of the key for the Warriors. So he's definitely going to have to show more there to warrant him being on the court. He hit a nice three for them, in this game as well, that ended up being for naught. So he clearly is capable on offense and someone that they'd like to be able to have in the rotation, because now they have 5 shooters all across the board on the floor and they look really good, but he's going to have to bring more. Daniel Tice has been unplayable. So if it's going to be more small ball, that's where I do get a little bit worried about the under. But look, in both of these games, the Warriors, tightening up for 17 points in the fourth quarter of game 1. In game 2, we saw the very same thing from the Celtics, who the game was really over at that point, that the Curry magic had taken effect. The calls definitely were not going their way, despite there not being that big of a disparity overall. I do think that affected the Celtics at some key moments for them. And look, Jordan Poole came in, and in that third quarter, he and Curry did things that were absolutely ridiculous. And if that's what it's going to take for the Warriors to win, which I think we both believe it will take that effort, Herculean from at least 2 of these guys, which means someone has to come along with Steph every single game for him to do that, which leads you to Klay Thompson. And the reason that this small ball lineup for the Warriors seems less formidable is obviously, the Celtics are just as switchable and big and versatile as anybody in the league, if not the most to that effect. But at the same time, Klay Thompson isn't Klay Thompson, both on the defensive end and against this Celtics team on the offensive end, and this has been going on since, all season, the last 5 games against them, averaging about 14 points, just 3 boards, and really shooting super poorly, as we see from three. What is it? 21% from three, 34% from the field for Klay in his last 5 against them. So the combination of his inability to really be an effective defender, combined with the fact that, he's not bringing them even the 3-point attempts at this point. They're just running him off the line. His mid-range game looks fine. That's wonderful, but that's not what he's on there to do. And that takes away from the danger that you feel. So all these things combined, and add the fact that, the Celtics play that much better. I mean, that much better. They're a little bit better on defense, but a little bit better than all very, very, very good at defense on the road. At home in the playoffs, specifically, to your surprise, which I would agree, it's somewhat surprising, but seeing them play that way at home, they just lost some games, especially against the Heat at home, where you're like, well, geez, no one's scoring for you guys. Like Tatum is putting up, as a historically bad game for himself, and the things that just seem like there's something else going on here. Like, that's the anomaly. Those things don't happen quite as often. But I still think that the sort of the offense will be slow. Each of these fourth quarters, it's the finals. Every fourth quarter, there's going to be a little bit of tightening up by at least one side if these games remain close going into the fourth quarter. So what I'll be interested here, man, just to finish the point too about who wins, because I am feeling under, and 212.5 is not gone low enough past, beneath the 215.5 it was in the previous game for me to be scared of it. But I'm looking at the third quarter, and that's really going to be a huge factor here. Is can the Celtics stave off a giant third quarter from the Warriors, specifically on offense, so that they actually have a shot in the fourth quarter, and that we're a little bit more competitive going into that fourth quarter?
Well, the Warriors avalanche in the third quarter doesn't usually come on the road, and they haven't been the same team on the road in these playoffs. Granted, it's the finals now, and they did start to show their championship acumen with Draymond setting the tone right from the opening jump there. I mean, you've got to credit them on some level for the 19 turnovers, 15 live ball turnovers. That is just the Celtics' MO at this point, where they do some dumb shit, and then they come back and they win the next game, and they usually win decisively because when they are the better team, when they have the best 5 usually in each series, and it's easy to figure out for their coach because he doesn't have as many options. And but the point is, they can overwhelm teams with their athleticism. They can match that physicality that the Warriors got away with to a degree in the third quarter. And yeah, you talk about that third quarter avalanche. What I saw in the first quarter was really telling to me about this, because, like I said to you, you don't need to give the Warriors confidence going in at any point in this NBA Finals. They've been there. They know they can do it even without Kevin Durant. But giving the Celtics confidence the way they did with that fourth quarter collapse in Game 1, and then you saw it leak over into Game 2 in that first quarter, where for a second it looked like Jaylen Brown was just going to dunk on their face all night, and there was nothing they could do. Draymond switched on to him, did a great job. Tatum and Brown still kind of got off. It was just that the role players did, in fact, come back to earth. As we always know in the playoffs, role players better at home. So Boston coming back home, I think under is a great play for sure. I think that's the sharp play, the sharp bet if you went, and even to do that live betting style, if you think they both come out hot the way they have the last 2 games. That hasn't necessarily been the case at the Garden lately, but that's because they're playing the Heat. That's the bet, but I think the bet to feel real snooty about it is to take the Celtics, even take them at an alternate line, because if they don't do dumb shit, like I said in the last video, on defense, like leave Steph Curry open, let him get going, and then all of a sudden he can hit everything. They can stop the Warriors. They can hold them in check. Kerr has to make some tough decisions. Like I'm saying, can you play GP and Draymond at the same time and still get offense? Can you play Poole and Curry at the same time and still play defense? And I don't think he's going to be able to figure those things out on the fly, or have as many answers as the Celtics, who would just say, well, let's throw out our gigantic lineup that can guard all of you. And Grant Williams, who I did not address, I thought he was holding his own defensively, certainly much better than Tice would. I think he can switch out. He can keep Curry in front of him to a degree. I mean, no big's going to stop him, but I think Grant is a nice chess piece for them when you go small, if you're going to have him at the 4 or 5, and he will play better. So Celtics
Yeah.
by 4, sure. It's plus 170 for them to cover 8, plus 230 for them to win double digits. I would just look at those as just some fun lines, or just looking at the live betting angle, which we talked about over and over with this team, because they just pull it together, and then all of a sudden it's a tsunami. You talk about the Warriors third quarter, the Celtics, it can come at any time. If they just play together and stop doing dumb shit, they're gonna crush this team probably.
It feels like that. Yeah, it feels like that. And Grant Williams, he should regress to the mean, back upwards to what he's capable of for sure in a lot of different areas in game 3. Also talking about how, role players play better at home. I think this is a game where I'm eyeing some Jordan Poole unders. Obviously, he got a nice look at the basket, but there's some time off, and now they're going back to Boston. Not going to be the same. Even Steph not shooting as well in these playoffs. A lot of guys, which is obvious based on their total splits there from the Warriors home and road in these playoffs. Much better on offense at home, as we talk about, and giving up 12 more points per game on the road as well. So their defense just goes way down as well. And yeah, the 110 points on the road. They have not played a team like these Celtics on defense. Even the Mavs were a team who, as good as they were based on how they play on defense, couldn't really hang with them enough. So I think all that to say, I'm actually looking. What I like and what I did, what has worked in game 2 specifically worked was the idea of a live alternate under. And that worked really well in this game when there's a 61 point first quarter, and I'm just thinking, come on, at one point, the total stayed it was about the same in the second quarter at about 215 and a half. The alternate was at 210 and a half, was plus 155 on your money. It felt right. And that second quarter really was proved to be what was needed there in terms of how slow that they slowed down. Obviously both teams sort of feel each other out and realize what they gave up in that first quarter. This has now happened twice in a row. So I feel a little bit better about an alternate under than I do necessarily the C's. Although I do agree that it's more likely that the C's are coming out and destroying this Warriors team than it necessarily being too close of a game if the Warriors aren't because even if the Warriors do come with that quote unquote Herculean effort from someone else besides Steph Curry on offense, they're still just going to be matching with the Celtics. They're not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean they're good enough to blow them out. So I think it is more likely that if the C's win, they're able to do so in a pretty nice fashion. You might be able to buy some like you said 4 points or so and feel pretty good about it, especially with the margins that we've seen in these playoffs. Even game 1 where it was being a blowout for the Celtics in one way, all it took was that Celtics being blown out. All it took was the Warriors offense shutting down and the C's turning things on, and then you still have a 12 point spread there towards the end of the game. So a lot of large margins to like, and maybe you do get some juice there buying some points either on that total or on that spread. So that is all the time we have for you guys in this one. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page. Continue to follow along with us as we're bringing you each and every video, game video, as well as these player props. So check that one out here in game 3. And until we see you next, happy betting.